Ashes of Creation, it's just 3 words, but these 3 words elicit strong emotions in a lot of MMO fans. Some of you get angry when you hear these words, and some of you have a full-blown nerdgasm. And these are the 2 groups that are the loudest. Post something about Ashes of Creation on the MMORPG subreddit and you will see a bunch of posts attacking the game and some that staunchly defend it. And this absolutism mentality is not uncommon these days, not just in MMO discourse, but really it seems prevalent in every discipline. Words like absolutely, always, definitely, must never are all absolutist words that suggest either 100% or 0% probability of an outcome. The problem is, if you know anything about probability, there is very rarely 100% or 0% probability of anything happening. 99% or 1%, sure, those can be real probabilities. And using these words or any other kind of hyperbole can certainly work for clickbait, which is why we see them used so often on the internet. In my videos, I like to reference real-world examples whenever possible, but in this case, I think the Star Wars universe might be able to help us out a little bit. Right, Chewbacca? Thanks, Chewie. In the Star Wars universe, according to Obi-Wan Kenobi, only a Sith deals in absolutes, which is an interesting statement because the word only makes this statement an absolute statement. Apparently, the Jedi most of the time don't deal in absolutes except when talking about Sith absolutism, which I think is where a silent majority of people reside regarding Ashes of Creation. These people are not convinced either way. Maybe they lean one way or the other, but they are open to changing their mind, and this non-committal approach is why they are currently pretty quiet, which, in my opinion, is a reasonable approach. And I view myself as more in this group than you might think. Now, some of you might be wondering how I could possibly classify myself as non-committal on Ashes when I have made over 140 videos on Ashes of Creation. One of them was over 1.5 hours long and went into exhaustive detail on everything known about Ashes of Creation. And I spent $500 to get access to Alpha 1, and I started an Ashes guild. So how could I possibly not be all in on Ashes? Well, we've already broken out some Star Wars references. It is now time to break out an overused cliche. The "I am a jaded MMO veteran" phrase is overused as hell, but in my case, it has more to do with me going all in on MMO after MMO that I thought would be the long-term home for me, and finding out the hard way it wasn't. It's not that these MMOs were bad or that I didn't end up putting thousands of hours into some of them, but they just didn't quite have what I wanted longer term. A few things were missing from the equation. Some of my favorite MMOs of all time are of course World of Warcraft, Dark Age of Camelot, and ArcheAge. I have liked and played a lot more MMOs than this, but these are the ones I view as cornerstone MMOs for me, and I've long waited for a newer or better version of each of these MMOs. In terms of ArcheAge, there really hasn't been another attempt to make a new ArcheAge that has launched yet. ArcheAge 2 and Ashes of Creation are the 2 contenders here for a real ArcheAge successor, but in terms of WoW clones, of course there have been many attempts, and some of them were really great, and I had a lot of fun in many of them. Rift, WildStar, and Star Wars The Old Republic are probably my 3 favorite WoW clones, but with all the WoW clones over the years, I'm a bit burned out on that formula. In terms of Dark Age of Camelot, there have been a few attempts to mimic at least the PvP portion of it. Of course, Warhammer Online was made by the same developers as Dark Age and was a very good game for its time, but it shut down due to all kinds of mismanagement. It still has a pretty popular private server, which I do play off and on. Then there have been a few MMOs that tried to put the RVR system from Dark Age in their game. Guild Wars 2 was one of the first ones that really tried to put a serious effort into making this system. While the world versus the world of Guild Wars 2 was fun, it had a lot of issues that made it in no way a contender to be a true Dark Age successor. Guild Wars 2 is still a great game irregardless, but it didn't fit what I wanted in terms of its PvP systems. It's a similar story for the Elder Scrolls Online. Cyrodiil is another Dark Age of Camelot clone, and while the overall map was an improvement on the Guild Wars 2 World vs. World map, the combat of ESO to me was a big downgrade, and so while the game was fun for a while, it wasn't a long-term solution for me either. But then, like a shining beacon from the MMO heavens, Mark Jacobs announced Camelot Unchained. This was probably the project that I've gotten the most hype for of all MMO announcements. I watched every podcast and video that was made at the time. It is the only MMO that I ever donated to in a Kickstarter, and it's the only reason I didn't participate in Ashes of Creation's Kickstarter because I had already participated in Camelot Unchained's Kickstarter. But it's no secret that the project is not doing well at all. Somehow it's still being worked on, and I am continually surprised that it hasn't actually shut down yet. But the odds of it ever releasing are incredibly low at this point. Then there was another project that I got very excited about and got sucked into buying early access, EverQuest Next. What they had planned for that game in terms of the sandbox features and voxel-based terraforming and crafting systems could truly have been revolutionary, but it of course shut down before ever releasing. So yes, I do feel a bit jaded. Not because all of these MMOs, at least the ones that actually released, were terrible, but more because the focus of these MMOs was not in the areas that I prefer in terms of open world PvP systems and player-driven economies, which is why Ashes intrigues me. Archcage was a fantastic MMO, but it had a ton of issues that held it back and ultimately killed it. On paper, Ashes seems like it might be addressing many of those issues. Sadly, I hate to say it, but Ashes is a fallback MMO for me after Camelot Unchained nearly destroyed my faith in MMOs. Given my history with MMOs, I'm keeping my options open and waiting to see what they come up with before I decide to say that I'm all in on this project. There are a lot of other MMOs in development, but this one to me has the most potential, at least for my tastes. Now, I still remain concerned about the scope of the project and if they can actually pull off this massive scope, but so far I do like what I'm seeing, especially the last few years. I'd like to extend an offer to all of you 100%ers or 0%ers out there. Come sit on the fence with me and let's wait and see what these developers can actually do. Wait to anoint it as the savior of MMOs until it actually proves itself, but don't discount it as having no chance to succeed either. A few months after launch, if you still feel strongly about your opinion, feel free to type up a 1,000-word essay on Reddit with all the hyperbole you want, but until then, give it a chance. And that's all I have for this one. Thanks for watching all the way to the end, and I'll see you guys in the next video.